Okay, hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about our improvements of Thunder protocol and also our proposal of a new synchronous notion. And this is a joint work with Rafael Paz and Elaine Shi. They are both professors at Cornell, and they are also scientists in Thunder token team. Okay, before talking about anything about Thunder, let me first recap the consensus goal for this public blockchain system. We call it state machine application. So the core value of these public blockchain protocols like Bitcoin, Ethereum, or also Thunder, they want to make these participants agree on an ever-growing linearly ordered lock. And more specifically, we want to have these two properties, the consistency and liveness. By consistency, we mean that honest nodes should agree on the same lock, and once a lock is confirmed, it can never be modified or changed in the future. And by liveness, we mean that if some transaction appears, then it should be included in the lock very quickly. Okay. So Thunderella is a consensus protocol used by Thunder Core. It is a public blockchain platform. And the rigorous mathematical proof is included in the paper by Rafael Paz and Elaine Shi, published in Yue Guo 2018. And in this talk, I'm first going to quickly go through the original Thunder protocol, and then I will describe an attack which can somehow make a confirmed transaction being undone in some case. So does this mean that Thunderella is flawed? And by thinking deeply into this question, we found that actually it is not Thunderella is flawed, it's the traditional synchrony definition actually allows this attack. So here, this leads to our proposal of new synchrony notion. And at the end of the talk, I will also give a fix to the Thunder, which makes it secure under this new notion and gives us better robustness and scalability. OK, so let me first quickly go through the original Thunder protocol. Let us begin with extremely simple voting process. So this voting protocol runs with n nodes, n committee members. Here are these superheroes, and an accelerator node. Here is the Vitalik. And some of these nodes can be corrupt, like here Loki is corrupt, and the accelerator can also possibly be corrupt. And this voting process has only 3 steps. The first step, the accelerator receives the transaction, and he signs the transaction with the sequence number and proposes this transaction to all of the voters. And next step, on receiving the proposal from the accelerator, every voter will vote for this transaction. By voting, I mean this voter signs the transaction and sends it back to the accelerator. So here, the corrupt nodes can vote for arbitrary things. They can also double vote. They can also keep silent. But the important thing here is that the honest node will only uniquely vote for one transaction that it hears from the proposal from the accelerator. This is important for our consistency proof. And next step, when accelerator collects enough number of votes, the accelerator will pack them into notarization using like BIS signature scheme, and send this notarization back to the voters. And now receiving the notarization from the accelerator, the vote can confirm on this transaction and output it. And this transaction can never be like canceled or undone in the future. So how many votes here are enough for confirm on transaction? Here, if we assume in the whole committee we have honest majority, the notarization requires at least 3/4 of votes. The analysis of consistency is just a very simple application of pigeonhole principle. Like imagine we have 2 nodes receive 2 notarizations for 2 transactions. This means both of them have received 3/4 of nodes, 3/4 of votes, and the intersection of these 2 sets of voters must have at least 1/2 of nodes. And because we have minority corruption assumption, this means at least one honest node must be in this intersection. And remember that the honest node will only vote uniquely for one sequence number. This guarantees that these two transactions must be equal. So this analysis does not depend on any additional assumption. It only requires honest majority. So here we have consistency with honest majority assumption. But for liveness, perhaps you have already noticed, we need stronger assumption. If we have less than 3/4 of nodes that are honest, or the accelerator might be down or might be corrupt, we might lose liveness because the honest node can never collect enough number of votes, and they can never confirm on next transaction, and the execution of the protocol gets stuck. So the challenge here is how to achieve liveness. The idea of Cinderella is also very simple. When the things is good, we execute on this fast path. We do this one-round voting process. And if the condition of liveness fails, the execution gets stuck, we can just fall back to a robust slow chain. This slow chain is just any kind of blockchain protocol that achieves consistency and liveness with honest majority assumption. It might be slower, but it gives us robustness. So here you might have two questions. The first one is, how do we detect the failure on the fast path? And the second one is, when we know something goes wrong, how do we fall back to the slow path? So in this talk, I will only give a high-level answer to the first question, and I will focus on the second one. Because the second one, the fallback scheme, is important for us to understand the attack that I'm going to describe later. So for the failure detection, the idea is also simple. When the fast path goes normally, the accelerator just posts periodically the checkpoint of the log of fast path down to the underlying slow chain. So this, we call it heartbeat, and it can be seen by all of the committee members. But when something goes wrong, enough number of committee members will notice that for a long period of time, there are no more new heartbeats. Then these committee members will stop participating in this fast path, and they start to fall back to the slow chain. OK, now I'm going to talk about the fallback scheme. The challenge here is that when these committee members decide to fall back, they might have different view of the fast path log due to the network delay or corrupt accelerator. Like here, the Spider-Man only sees a subsequence of the log of the Iron Man. OK, so the challenge here is that they need to agree on the fast path only with this slow chain. The idea is that we can post all of our notarized but uncheckpointed transaction onto the slow chain. Because the slow chain guarantees consistency only with honest majority assumption, this guarantees that any transaction that I output on the fast path will finally appear on the slow chain, which means every others will also output it. So do you have any questions about this part? OK, so as a conclusion, the Cinderella achieves the following two good properties. In the optimistic case, it can confirm a transaction only with one voting attempt. And if things goes bad, it can always fall back to a robust blockchain protocol and get at least the performance of the underlying blockchain. And whenever the nodes reach consensus on the underlying slow chain, they can always re-elect the accelerator and the committee members to rebootstrap the fast path. So 99% of time, the protocol will run on the fast path and can confirm transaction in 2 or 3 actual network rounds. OK, so it sounds good now. We have consistency, have liveness. We are efficient. We can confirm the transaction very fast. But as I said, I'm going to describe an attack that can actually get some confirmed transaction being somehow undone. And in this attack, even no nodes are doing any malicious things. The only thing required in this attack is that some nodes drops offline in a specific timing manner. So does this mean the Cinderella is flawed? Let's take a look together. OK, so this attack goes like this. The first step is the same. The accelerator proposes the transaction and the sequence number to all of the voters. And the committee members will vote for this transaction. they send this vote back to the accelerator, and the accelerator collects enough number of votes, and he will send this notarization back to the, all of the voters. But unfortunately, let's assume Coinbase is the only, it's the first node that received this notarization. But unfortunately, the accelerator drops offline immediately after he sent this notarization to the Coinbase node. So here, Vitalik drops offline, and at this time point, Coinbase is the only one who sees this notarization. OK. So as I described, Coinbase will just output this transaction and think it is confirmed. And he tells Patrick, hey, Patrick, someone sent you a bunch of money and want to buy you a Ferrari car. And Patrick think, oh, OK, Coinbase says this transaction is confirmed. I'm happy to deliver my Ferrari car. So Patrick delivers his Ferrari car. And make things worse, at this time, Coinbase also drops offline. So what does this mean? Coinbase is the only one who knows this notarization, and no one else sees this notarization. And Coinbase drops offline. No, not any nodes online knows this notarization, or this transaction is confirmed. So as I said, all of the other nodes will find that the heartbeats stop, and they will start fall back to the slow chain after a while. And what they're supposed to do here is they put all of their notarized transactions onto this slow chain so they can get consensus. However, at this time point, Coinbase is also supposed to put this notarization onto the slow chain, but because he's offline, he fails to do so. So when Coinbase comes back online after 1 day, all of the other nodes have rebootstrapped the fast path, and the notarization of this transaction has not appeared on the fast path, on the slow path. So what happens here is that no one else sees the notarization, and no one else includes this transaction into their log. So this transaction is somehow being undone by all of the other nodes. So now Patrick lost his Ferrari car, and he don't receive any payments, so only thing he can do is just crying. OK, so this sounds horrible, right? It looks like the protocol is flawed. Coinbase node does not do anything malicious. Perhaps the Coinbase doesn't even know he's offline for a short period. But even if I come back online after a short while, I lose all of the consistency with, from the other nodes. So how can a protocol allow this kind of horrible behavior? Does this mean the protocol is flawed? And if you think it is flawed, so what about that 74 pages of security proof in the Eurocrypt conference, which is a top-tier crypto conference? Does this mean the whole security proof is also wrong? So by thinking deeply into this question, it turns out that actually the proof is not wrong. And the protocol is also allowed to have this undesired behavior. This actually is inherently allowed by the classical synchrony model. So what does it mean by we have a synchronous model? In a synchronous network, we assume that all of the honest messages will be delivered or sent in only one round. If any node fails to satisfy this assumption, this node will be considered malicious, or not malicious, will be considered corrupt or failure. So if I just drop offline for perhaps only one round, I don't deserve any consensus anymore. So does this part make sense? OK. So perhaps you are thinking that I'm not talking about anything new, because this is just the assumption of synchronous network, and this is actually why people use partial synchrony in some scenarios. So partial synchrony is having this very loose assumption is saying that the message delay can be as long as you want, and in this case, the temporary outage can be just regarded as a long message delay. So no matter how long you wait, whenever you receive the message finally, you will get the consistency with the other nodes. So why don't we just use partial synchrony network rather than use synchrony? The problem here is there is a long-existing and well-known upper bound saying that any protocol that's secure under partial synchronous assumption can only tolerate less than 1/3 of corruptions. On the contrary, in a synchronous network, we know a bunch of consensus protocols that are efficient and tolerating minority corruption assumption. And moreover, if you don't care about running a protocol for a very long time, for many, many rounds, you can even get a protocol that tolerates arbitrary number of corruptions, like $strong. So, an interesting and natural question here is it possible to achieve the best of both worlds? Can we both have these, we don't regard these temporary offline nodes as faulty, and we can still get this better resiliency? So at the first glance, the answer of this question might be impossible, because to circumvent that 1/3 lower bound, we rely critically on the timing assumption, that one-round timing assumption of synchronous network. So how can we circumvent the lower bound without assuming the message can be delivered very quickly? But the interesting point here is, who says that the network must be either synchronous, must be either fully synchronous or not synchronous at all? So who says that the synchronous status of a network must be a binary choice? So can we quantify the status of the network more accurately to find that if there is any trade-off between these two models? So let's consider a more natural network condition in practice. So in most cases, we have a bunch of nodes that are honest and they are well connected. They have this strong network signal. But we also have a small set of nodes that might experiencing short-term outage. They might be offline for a while. They might have unstable connection. And we also have some corrupt nodes who can behave arbitrarily. So the synchrony network is saying that I don't care about that gray set. All of them, I just consider them as faulty. And the partial synchrony is assuming that all of the nodes are in the gray set, and it does not make use of the good connection of this green set. So what we want to do is to take the size of this green set into consideration and to see if in this case we can guarantee consensus for the green nodes and the gray nodes. OK, so does this part make sense? Do you have any questions? OK. OK, so answer to this question actually includes two parts. The first one is, if this green set is too small, then our conclusion is that it's impossible to reach consensus between these sets. This conclusion is like intuitive because you can imagine that you have two partitions in the network who are both well connected internally, and they are not connected between each other. So how can they reach the same consensus if I only have like two small partitions? But if the network condition is better, if we have more than half of nodes are well connected and the message for them can be delivered very quickly, we can actually guarantee consensus between these green nodes and the gray nodes. So actually, I'm going to talk how to fix the Thunder protocol that I talked about earlier, to make it guarantee consensus in this case, and how we can even do better reach a stronger notion that we can guarantee consensus in a more dynamic network. Like here in this graph, it looks like this green set should be static, like all of the nodes that once online should be online from the very beginning to the end of the protocol. But with Cinderella, with a fix, we can actually guarantee consensus as long as at any time point, this green set is large enough. So which means we tolerate more network churn, like the nodes can come and go, can be online and offline, as long as at any point, the set of these well-connected components is large enough. So does this part make sense? OK. So we also call this notion best possible partition tolerant because, as I said, if we only have the green set less than 1/2, we cannot have such a protocol. So 1/2, more than 1/2 is the best partition tolerance that we can achieve. So next, I'm going to talk about how to make Cinderella best possible partition tolerant. Actually, this fix also contains 2 parts. To make the whole protocol partition tolerant, we need to have both fast path and the slow path to be best possible partition tolerant. And because the fix to the slow path is a little bit tricky, I'm not going to the detail of how to fix the slow chain, but I will focus on the fix to the fast path, and it will be extremely simple. OK, so assume that every honest node only vote for some transaction after they see the notarization for the previous transaction, which means now I will only vote for that blue transaction after I see the notarization for all of the golden transactions. This is a precondition. And now on the fast path, we need to chop off the last notarized block, the last notarized transaction. Sorry, I use block like interchangeably. And I only output the whole prefix without the last transaction. And when we fall back to the slow chain, we actually put all of the notarized transaction down to the slow chain. So there are only like 2 simple steps. We can make this protocol partition tolerant. So why this works? It is still a very simple application of pigeonhole principle. I only output golden transaction after I see the notarization for the blue transaction. The notarization for blue transaction actually contains more than 3/4 of votes. So this means more than 3/4 of nodes have already seen the notarization for the golden transaction. As we assume, they will only vote for this blue one after they've seen the notarization for the golden ones. And because we have this, in this best possible partition tolerant model, we'll assume that in any round, there are more than 1/2 nodes are online. So when the fallback happens, there will also be more than half of nodes that are honest and well-connected. So there must be some nodes in this intersection. They are both honest, they are well-connected, and they voted for this blue transaction. So this part of nodes will guarantee that they know the notarization for all of the golden transactions, and they will put these golden transactions onto the slow chain. So the core idea here is that I only output some transaction when I know that some nodes will put the notarization down to the slow chain, even if I drop offline. I know some online nodes will do this for me, and I know enough number of nodes in the network have already seen the notarization, the same notarization I have. So does this part make sense? Or do you have any question about this proof? OK, so actually, this is the whole fix of the fast path. And though I'm not going to talk about the detail of the fix to the slow path, I want to mention 2 interesting points here that we found when we tried to design the fix of the slow path. The first one is that the best possible partition tolerant notion is actually turns out to be a refinement of honest majority notion in the classical synchrony network. So, but we investigated a bunch of protocols that work in classical synchrony with honest majority assumption. All of them do not satisfy the best possible partition tolerant, which means they are just like the original Cinderella. They cannot tolerate any nodes become offline and back online again. So Cinderella is actually the first one in this area. And the second point is that the traditional synchrony notion is somehow misleading, because in a classical synchronous network, we tend to think that if protocol tolerates dishonest majority, it is more robust than the protocol that only tolerates honest majority. Like the more corruption you tolerate, the more robust you are. This is like intuition in the classical synchronous network. However, it turns out that any protocol that tolerates dishonest majority cannot be best possible partition tolerant. So these two sets must be are disjoint, which means sometimes the more corruption you tolerate does not mean that you are better in this robustness area. Okay, I think so. Here are the 2 points. And as a conclusion, in this talk, I first quickly describe the Thunder protocol, and I describe an fake attack. And then I propose the new best possible partition tolerant notion, and I give a fix to Cinderella, which gives us better robustness and make the Cinderella can work on a larger network. This gives us better scalability. Okay, thank you very much. So please, I'm happy to. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Yue. That was really fun. Who has? We have a question right here. You're right in the middle, so.
Thanks for a great talk. I was wondering what happens if the 1/2 honest nodes kind of lose their well-connectedness and temporarily are not well-connected anymore. Do you lose only liveness, or do you also lose the safety property?
Sorry, let me repeat your question. So you mean if some honest node get offline, and will it lose liveness or also consistency?
Yeah, if you have, you typically assume like 1/2 honest, well-connected.
Yeah.
And if temporarily you don't have the 1/2 well-connected honest nodes, but say less than that.
Actually, so as I said, it is a refinement of synchrony, which means we still use the assumption that the message can be delivered very quickly in the majority part of network. So if in some round less than 1/2 are online, then this protocol, let me think. I think it can lose consistency. Yeah, it's still a synchronous assumption.